Hey everybody, Dr. G here. I'm a licensed clinical psychologist and body language expert, and today we're going to be analyzing more behavior and body language from Chad Daybell. Chad Daybell is currently on trial for his alleged role in the murders of Lori Vallow's children, JJ and Tylee, as well as his former wife, Tammy Daybell. A couple of quick things before we get started. One, I wanted to remind you this is not a psychological evaluation of any kind. These are just my opinions. In addition to that, I wanted to make sure you know that the goal of this is not to prove his guilt nor his innocence. There's currently a jury doing that. I'm just going to be here providing commentary on his behavior and his body language. Last thing before we get started is I do want to remind you to like and subscribe if you want to see more content just like this. All right, let's go. So what we're looking at today first is some clips from the trial. Now, the trial's been going on for several days, and the cameras have actually improved. Still not great. It's still limited in terms of what we can see, but I'm going to provide some commentary based on the behavior and body language. After that, we're going to look at an old interview from 2011 and see how his behavior and body language compares now and then. This first clip is jailhouse calls between him and Lori Vallow Daybell. Let's just jump right in.
This is a call from and paid for by
Lori.
So as you can already see, he sits very still. You're going to notice this a lot. He tends not to move. If you look at previous hearings he's been in, he will sit and literally almost not move the entire time. So we do have to pay close attention to any body language we actually observe.
an inmate at Madison County Jail. This call is subject to recording and monitoring. If you don't wish to talk, hang up now. Thank you for using Telmate.
Hi, babe.
Hello?
Are you okay?
Oh, they're searching.
Now, watch right here. If you watch his mouth, now, one of the challenges with the low quality is it's hard to really pinpoint exactly what we're seeing, but it looks like we're seeing movement around his mouth as he's starting to listen to this. And when we do move our mouths, when we lick our lips, we bite on our lips, those types of things, it's soothing. It's when we're starting to feel really anxious. So playing this call may be stressing him out.
Oh, they're searching the property.
The house right now?
Yeah. Yeah. I'm at Emma's.
So you can hear how calm and almost sedate he sounds. Now, he has always had sort of a measured way of speaking. If you listen to his old 2011 interview, he sounds like that as well, but not quite like this. I think that something he probably has worked on over the years is controlling his outward emotion. In other words, showing as little as possible, speaking at a low volume, not moving much. And this is probably a way that he's attempted to assert control. He certainly has done that a lot throughout the hearings, and more so than just somebody saying, don't show a lot of emotion, don't react. I mean, he will literally sit still and not move.
Mark means we'll be talking to you.
Okay. What, are they in the house?
No, they're out in the property.
Are they seizing stuff again?
They're searching. There's a search warrant, and so
It's hard not to notice how calm they're staying as they talk about this, almost like they're trying not to say something, that they're being very careful with their language, because there's no emotion here. There's no connection here. All you're hearing is in very specific language what's going on.
there's a search warrant, and so the moment I just at Emma's with the kids.
Okay.
Yeah, I tried to set up a call. I'm glad you called.
Yeah.
They're so sedate and so calm on this call. It almost makes me question what the purpose of it was.
And we'll see what transpires.
So between his sedate way of speaking, I mean, look at him and his attorney, for example. He is just not moving. His attorney has more of a natural movement. He's taking some notes. He's moving around a little bit because that's generally what people do when they sit still. So his lack of movement is notable because it seems intentional. It seems like he is trying not to move so that nobody can observe any reaction that he might be having, which in and of itself says something, because oftentimes when we're trying to hide, there's a reason we're trying to hide, because we see danger, we feel a threat.
I'm feeling pretty calm. I would call Mark, maybe. Just talk with him.
Have you talked to him already?
I did call him, yes.
So he knows what they're doing?
Yeah. Which I did.
What's so interesting is not just what they're saying, but what they're not saying. This doesn't sound like a normal conversation between people. It seems like people trying to avoid talking about certain things.
I love you, and we'll talk soon.
Okay, baby. I love you.
Okay. Love you. Goodbye.
Now, it's interesting. After the call is over, Chad Daybell appears to be looking around. I'm curious if he's looking at people's reactions. We can't see him in enough detail to be definitive, but it seems like after the call's over, he is looking around, trying to see how people have reacted. That's typically what I would think somebody would be looking around like that for.
Or cross-examine at this time, or save that for when he's recalled? Very well.
So one thing you'll notice with Chad Daybell right now, one of the positions he puts his face in, like this, he looks up a lot and he puts his nose in the air. And we oftentimes do this as an air of superiority to show that we're above something. Lori Daybell does the exact same behavior. And oftentimes it's a way to show I'm above this. I am above what's going on right now. Or if you're talking to somebody, I'm above you. The whole idea is that it shows a sense of superiority. Now, I'm not going to make it go for too long because he does this for a while, but I'll let it go for a few seconds so you can see this isn't just brief. He leaves his face position this way.
And officer, you've also, are coming back, you've got a subpoena from my office as well to show up, and we've made arrangements for that. Is that correct?
Correct.
Thank you.
Because in essence, what it shows is I'm confident and I'm better than this. I'm turning my nose up to it in essence. So we'll go ahead and stop with this clip. Let's go on to the next clip. Now we're going to watch some testimony related to financial documents that were found in Lori Vallow's storage unit.
And is it a true and accurate representation of what you created?
Yes.
Your Honor, for demonstrative purposes, I'd ask that Exhibit 62 be entered into evidence.
Any objection?
And may I publish?
Yes, Exhibit 62 is admitted.
So now you're seeing him move around a little bit more. And part of this reason may be because when it comes to something like numbers, when it comes to finances, those are different than the other types of evidence that you're going to have in cases like this sometimes, because there's not as much interpretation needed. These are numbers on a page. These are facts. And so he may feel more anxiety about this because he has less control over this. And so you may see him getting more animated because of this. Let's keep going.
Detective, is there a pointer
Yes.
there? Can you walk the jury through the accounts that you are going to be talking about?
Okay, so on this page, we're going to be, or just specifically for Lori Vallow Daybell and Tylee Ryan. Again, having served several subpoenas and warrants.
You can also see him moving around more once they turn off the lights, which in some ways suggests that when the lights are on, it may be very intentional that he's not moving.
Electronic signature card for the account of the JP Chase Morgan, the 0769 account.
What is
Now, this is a little bit different. It looks like he has his finger pressed into his mouth. And in a lot of ways, it's almost like you think of a baby using a pacifier. We're literally pacifying ourselves with something when we put things in our mouth like that, because it's very calming. So the fact that he's doing this, at least from what I've seen from the trial so far, this is unusual. He doesn't usually do this. You can also see that his body posture is leaning forward. So he's very connected with and interested in this exhibit. So he's showing a lot more body language around this than he has during most aspects of the trial from what I've seen.
significance of that account to your investigation?
So we learned that this account was an everyday account that both Charles and Lori utilized while living in Arizona. And we know that with this account is specifically interacts.
It's hard to tell, but it almost looks like he's biting his nails. Now, the quality's not good enough to say that definitively, but it does seem to be a surprising reaction from him so far.
With Tylee's joint account when they're moving monies, transferring monies from account to account.
All right. Can you look at States Exhibit 63B?
And then he brushed his nose like that. Another soothing behavior, trying to stimulate yourself to feel calmer. So as he moved his hand, rubbed his hands across his nose, all of these sort of fidgety, pacifying behaviors.
And this is the account ending in 0769, correct?
Correct.
And did you review all the documents that came in with that?
I did.
We're skipping ahead a little bit more, but as he's looking through these documents, once again, pressing his hand on his chin, depending on who it is, context can matter a lot. And for Chad Daybell, somebody we've seen sit very stoically, it's interesting to see him using more types of body language like this. Resting your hand on your chin. It's to make yourself appear as though you're feeling calm and casual. Because really, in a situation like this, it's not probably going to be all that comfortable to hold your hand backwards and rest your hand on your chin, but it gives the appearance of being calm. Does he actively think about this? No, it's probably an involuntary response to wanting to appear calm. But it is interesting to see him put himself in this position as he's looking over these financial documents.
On that projector, there is actually a light that I think will remove the shadow. I can have staff attorney assist you with that if you'd like.
And there he is touching the lips again.
That'd be great.
Now he's got the backs of his fingers on his lips. Once again, we're seeing more and more and more pacifying behaviors. And so it's always important to focus when people are trying to pacify themselves because they're feeling something. That doesn't necessarily mean that it's the most consequential aspect of any case, but it's always worth noting when people are touching their lips over and over again. So now we've got an idea of what he's like during the current trial. Let's jump back to 2011 and watch part of an interview about one of his books. You're going to get a chance to see what he's like when he's putting his best foot forward. We'll also get to compare it with his current behavior now. Previously, I analyzed part of this video, but this will be a more in-depth analysis.
Welcome to Turning the Page. I'm host Donnie Morse of Confetti Antiques and Books. In today's program, we are very excited to have with us author Chad Daybell and a good friend of mine as well, Ryan.
So you can see that he's actually a little bit uncomfortable with this interview, which is ironic considering this is a small interview that's going to be seen by very few people. You can see him lick his lips. You can see his fingers are interlocked. They look pretty tightly interlocked. That suggests that there's some stress there, probably some discomfort. So doing something like this is probably, at least at the first, is going to be uncomfortable for him. So that gives us some idea of his confidence level at this point.
Very excited to have with us author Chad Daybell and a good friend of mine as well, Ryan Nelson, who has read Chad's books and has
Ryan Nelson over there looks like he's a lot more relaxed than Chad Daybell. You can see Chad's leaning forward. He's got his arm resting there. He's trying to lean in because that's what we do to get closeness with the interviewer. So he wants this interview to go really well, whereas the other guy looks a lot more relaxed.
has quite a bit to say about them. Chad, welcome to the program. Ryan, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Chad, I know you have written many, many books. To get started, why don't you tell us a little bit about...
You can continue to see him do things with his mouth, pursing his lips, moving his lips. The mouth is a very large source of comfort. We pacify ourselves with our lips. We do it even before we're born. We're sucking our thumbs in the womb. So the idea is when we're feeling uncomfortable, we tend to fidget with our lips a lot.
How you got started writing, where that all came from. What was your motivation originally to start writing?
Okay, I started as a reporter and editor at the Standard Exam.
So look at the way that his body is closed off. You could see the interviewer using his hands, opening up. He's keeping himself closed. So that could mean one of two things. One, it could be just discomfort, that he's uncomfortable right now. It could also mean that he is a little bit anxious about letting people in too much. He may not want to fully expose himself at this time. So if you watch, he'll move his thumbs a little bit. He'll open up a tiny bit, but he's not opening up his hands. So he's really not that comfortable right now, and he may not be comfortable sharing about himself in any real way.
Okay, I started as a reporter and editor at the Standard Examiner after I'd graduated from BYU in journalism, where I'd served as the city editor. And while I was in Ogden, I kept getting ideas to write a novel, but when you're an editor 8 hours a day, you kind of get burned out and don't want to go home and write. So I'd actually worked at the Springville Cemetery during college, and so the opportunity came.
So he's more soft-spoken than you might expect. He does seem, as I said, he seems uncomfortable. He continues to do things with his mouth. He continues to make sure to look at the interviewer, make sure that what he's saying is okay. He's looking for approval as he talks about this. So I think his confidence is just not great at this point.
The Springville Cemetery during college, and so the opportunity came for me to take over as the cemetery sexton there.
So you saw the eyebrow raise. Now, I said that he's looking at the interviewer, and obviously it's good to make eye contact, but the way that he's making eye contact, he's generally looking away, then after makes a statement, glances at him, makes sure that it's okay. So he is looking to the interviewer to make sure that what he's saying is all right. But then he raised his eyebrows to point out the importance of the fact that he worked in a cemetery. He thinks that's interesting. That's really what his book is based on. So when you watch the eyebrows, that's a way to focus in on what they want you to hear. That's what's important to the person talking.
And I took that job in 1995, and as I worked there, suddenly the ideas came more, and I had an idea come for an entire trilogy.
You had a little more dead time while you were there?
Exactly, yeah. It's amazing what you can think about when you're weed eating and digging graves. And I wrote what's called the Emma trilogy and came up with some characters. They're all based on family members. The stories sit right there in Springville and Spanish Fork, and so.
So you see him pursing his lips, raising his eyebrows. It's interesting because it seems like he's very uncomfortable, and this is part of how he soothes that. He looks at the interviewer, purses his lips, raises his eyebrows. So it's this dance he sort of has. It's this way of trying to express himself. I'm uncomfortable, but it's important to me to talk about these things.
Well, that went really well. I actually got quite a bit of publicity and
positive response from
exactly.
readers.
Yes.
Who published that for you?
Cedar Fort.
Okay.
And his default hand position continues to be closed. He's not comfortable enough yet to be open, to look more comfortable. He seems like someone that's anxious. He does seem like someone that doesn't have a lot of confidence right now.
But at a certain point, Lee and the owner of the company, Lyle, asked if I would take over as their managing editor. And so I joined Cedar Fort, where I continued to write books. I moved into more of a nonfiction area.
So you can hear him almost short of breath at times, which would probably mean that his heart's pumping pretty hard. We get lower on oxygen when our heart's pumping hard, so it makes us take deeper breaths in. This is something that's anxiety-provoking enough for him to have his heart pounding. So it really helps us better understand some of the allure of somebody like Lori Daybell that was giving him attention, to give it an idea of how far he'd be willing to go to seek her affection and to win her over. So it's very interesting to see just how much confidence he seemed to have lacked before he interacted with and had a relationship with Lori Daybell.
Yeah, for a while I wrote the Tiny Talk series with my wife Tammy for primary children, and then the Aaronic Priesthood, Youth of Zion, and so that went really well. And then at one point I felt I should write a book about my cemetery experiences called One Foot in the Grave. That went really well.
We've got a copy here, One Foot in the Grave. Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, when I was the cemetery sexton, I would keep a journal every day. And
for those of you that don't know, a cemetery sexton essentially is someone who runs a cemetery. As he had said, he was digging graves and doing weed whacking and things like that, but basically he's going to maintain the upkeep of a graveyard.
There were just a lot of curious experiences that would happen that once I retired from the cemetery, I compiled into this book, and it's actually the favorite book of a lot of people that read my books.
Can you tell us one?
So he's talking about the curious experiences that have happened. Now we're starting to get in some idea of why he might lack some confidence, why he might be so uncomfortable. Not just because he's on camera, but because he's on camera saying things that he knows are not true. Now, I believe that it's totally possible people talk about curious experiences they've had and strange supernatural things, and they believe it 100%. I do not believe Chad Daybell is one of those people. I think that he is someone who likes to lie. He told Lori Daybell a lot of things that I feel he did not believe were true. All the zombie stuff, I don't think he believed any of that. So I believe right now he's trying to sell something that he does not, in fact, believe is true, which is making him more uncomfortable. Let's keep going. We'll talk more about this as we go.
I compiled into this book, and it's actually the favorite book of a lot of people that read my books.
Can you tell us one story from the book?
All right. So he just basically said that it's a favorite book of a lot of people. He's not been making good eye contact. He's been looking away. It seems like he hasn't been good with eye contact at all so far. But during this part in particular, up until the very end, after he finished saying that, he looked again for approval, but he's really avoiding eye contact, which sometimes can be an indicator of lying and deception. Sometimes it's just because people are uncomfortable with that. But in his case, it seems like he's got more of a lack of eye contact right now.
Favorite book of a lot of people that read my books.
Can you tell us one story from the book?
Then you saw the tongue between the teeth. Now, people oftentimes do this when they think they've gotten away with something. Watch this right here.
Can you tell us one story from the book?
Sure. One that definitely sticks in people's mind involves a man named Eddie. He was
So he's trying to be emphatic. You saw him using his hands. He wants to be emphatic, but there's just too much discomfort here. So he's holding up the book because obviously he's trying to sell it, but he's also using it as a bit of a prop. I talk about this oftentimes, that liars oftentimes use props. Now, I'm not guaranteeing that he's lying, but I don't think he believes a lot of what he's saying. And having a prop there helps him feel more comfortable.
kind of a homeless man in Springville. I won't give his last name because people might know him. He was buried right next to my office, and about 4 days after his burial, I think he stuck around because I started having locks picked here and there.
So that laughter, now sometimes that can be a way to connect with people. It can be a charming way to connect. I think that was an uncomfortable laugh because, once again, he is telling things that he knows are not true. He's creating stories around this because he wants to sell his book. So that was an uncomfortable laugh to soothe the fact that he is telling what I believe are likely lies. Like I said, I don't think that he believes this stuff.
Having locks picked here and there. We had a lock on our compound where we'd keep the backhoe, and I would check it every night. But once Eddie...
So he said we had a lock where we keep the backhoe. Watch his head right here. So he shrugged one shoulder. That's a non-committed shrug. Now, when we do both shoulders, that's a levitating effect. So in other words, our whole body is exposed. That's a very vulnerable thing to do. So when someone says, I don't know, and they lift both shoulders, we tend to think of that as more true. He's shrugging one shoulder. He's shaking his head like this. He's telling you that he doesn't even believe what he's saying right now.
Lock on our compound where we'd keep the backhoe, and I would check it every night. But once Eddie had passed away, and it started opening every night. And then another lock on a shed nearby, he had actually unlocked and hung about 2 feet above the door. And I knew it was Eddie, it just had to be. And I kind of told him, it's time to go to the light, Eddie. And he gave one last ditch effort, I guess, the next morning.
So he's getting so much practice here with the type of conning that he ultimately did with Lori Vallow Daybell. He's basically saying, not only am I so special that I got to interact with the spirit, but then I'm the one that guided it to the light. Look how important I am. I had this amazing experience where he was hanging keys and doing and unlocking stuff and all of that. And I also told him that he needed to go to the light. So this is like a light version of what he ended up talking about later. He's practicing a little bit. He's sort of seeing how far he can go with nonsense or things that he knows are nonsense for him. Like I said, I'm not saying other people can't have strange experiences, but I don't think he had these experiences. So as he's trying to sell somebody on this, he's getting an idea of what he can and can't get away with.
I found the garbage can shoved in front of my door. The locks were all opened again. And finally, I just was quite stern with him and said, go to the light. It's time to move on. And that stopped the lock picking.
So his forcefulness, his power, that's the reason that all of this finished up. That's the reason all this ended, because he got stern and said, go to the light. Now, he feels uncomfortable telling this story because he knows that it's nonsense. He doesn't know if he can get away with these kinds of lies yet. But I believe as things progressed, I think he got more and more and more bold. But this is the early stages of him testing out ludicrous lies.
And said, "Go to the light. It's time to move on," and that stopped the lock picking.
So this is a way, it's subtle, but it's a way to gain distance from the interviewer. This is making him feel uncomfortable to say this. He wants people to hear it. He wants to say it because, man, if people could believe this, they might buy my book. But he knows that this is an area that might be unbelievable. Doesn't know how the interviewer is receiving it yet because they haven't had that much of a back and forth. They haven't talked a lot yet. So there is discomfort there. So after telling this bold lie, he leans his head the other way in a non-committed way.
And that stopped the lock picking. So
it's a lot of little stories like that of incidents you had there at the
it's
cemetery.
mainly aimed at their.
And as you can see, the interviewer has a fairly intense eye contact. And I think that makes Chad Daybell very uncomfortable because, like I said, maybe he's just not as practiced in these types of lies yet. But when you have somebody that's looking at you intensely and you're saying something that isn't true, you're going to feel even more uncomfortable.
I've actually not seen this before, and I will definitely have to pick that up and read it. I really enjoy local history and tidbits of stories about our communities here. So that'll be one for me. One Foot in the Grave by Chad Daybell that I would love to pick up. So tell us a little bit more. After that, what did you end up doing?
Okay, I worked for Cedar Fort for 3 years as their manager.
So watch his hands right here.
Okay,
So he's trying to open up a little bit.
Worked for.
And then he starts steepling. Now he's doing his steepling low. Now steepling is when you touch your fingers together. Something like this. You see CEOs and executives do this kind of stuff all the time. It's a way to assert authority, a way to assert expertise. But when you're doing it low like this, oftentimes it's a way to show that you want to be an authority, but you don't feel comfortable about it. So this is not necessarily a hand sign that I suggest that most people do because sometimes people perceive it as pretentious. But it is a way to exert authority, to exert your expertise. So right now he wants to be an authority, but he's not very confident in it, so he's keeping it very low.
And then I met a lady named Suzanne Freeman, who she had had a near-death experience in 1999, and she met one of our authors at a book signing.
So as you may already know, he claimed later on to have had a near-death experience. At this point in time, he was not telling people he had had this near-death experience. So understand, the person he's talking about is an inspiration for a later con of his. I want you to keep that in mind.
And she felt impressed to tell her story. She'd kind of kept it to herself. But she had died and met the Savior and gone beyond the veil and then had some experiences there and came back. And then this author.
So look at this facial expression after he says this.
Back. And then.
So he's licking his lips, he's bunching his lips. There's discomfort here. There's probably jealousy. Previously, he was talking about how he worked in a graveyard. And while that's interesting, while then he's able to talk about the supernatural experiences he claimed to have had, it is far less interesting and far less exciting than what this woman has gone through. So it's interesting to see his look right there. That's his face after thinking about what he is saying that happened to her, something that he later steals.
So I went down to Sanpete County where Suzanne lived and interviewed her. And
now, as a newspaper editor, you knew how to do that. You knew how to interview somebody to really come at them from a couple different angles and see if they were, like you say, exaggerating or flowering up the story, so to speak.
Because I have read a lot of books about near-death experiences, and also doctrinally I wanted to make sure she was on track. And I found out.
So it's going to be up to him to make sure that she's on track. Once again, he is trying to identify himself as special. He's trying to be the authority on these things. So we're already seeing a lack of confidence in it, but a strong desire to be special. I talked about the similarities between Ruby Franke and Jody Hildebrandt. This is the same dynamic I see between Chad Daybell and Lori Daybell. There is Lori Daybell and Ruby Franke seem to share some similarities. They seem to really get into the stories. They seem to believe what they're being told, and then they really run with it. Whereas Chad Daybell and Jody Hildebrandt, they are the ones that create the stories. They hold all of the power, and they get so excited at the idea that somebody else believes what they're saying, that they're giving them this much power. They really run with it. And so we're seeing in this interview, when he's really given attention, he gets more excited by it. So we'll go ahead and stop here. This trial is going to be very, very long, or we're expecting it to be. So hopefully this is helping you better understand some of the behavior we're seeing during the trial, as well as him trying to put his best foot forward. Hopefully it's helping you better understand some of the body language we're seeing and some of what we're not seeing. Now, if you want me to analyze other aspects of Chad Daybell, or if there's other videos, anything else related to this case that you want me to look at, please let me know in the comments below. I could analyze some of the old books. I could do a number of things, and I'm open to pretty much any of it. So if you have any ideas, please let me know. Last thing before we get finished up is I do want to remind you to like and subscribe if you want to see more content just like this. All right, thanks for watching.